Okay, at 6:30, you'll call to order the meeting of the Cherry Hills Village City Council, Tuesday, March 3rd. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Safavi?
Here.
Councillor Wheel?
Here.
Councillor Brown?
Here.
Councillor Gallagher?
Here.
Councillor Sheldon?
Here.
Councillor Blum?
Here.
If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Audience participation. Thank you, Laura. We have one sign up. Brent Klein. Welcome. If you could state your name and your address, please, for the.
Good evening, everyone. Brent Klein, 135 Mead Lane. And first and foremost, I want to thank all the council members, Mr. Mayor, all the professionals that work so hard that I can claim that I live in the best city in America. So thank you for that. The reason I am here is and I talked to Alice and I talked to the chief, is the geese issue. And I know a lot of us have talked about it over time. City and County of Denver had the coaling issue, which that's not what I'm suggesting. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on, with Allen Hutto Commons coming up, it's going to be beautiful. And I know the architects have made it less comfortable, I should say, after talking to Alice on how the geese are going to maybe not want to come and use that area. But it is a problem. I live across the street, and it's hard to even walk the dogs. Mead Lane is covered with geese excrement, and it's just an issue. And I don't know, I know there's neighborhood golf courses that are using a couple companies out there to help kind of mitigate it. But I just wanted to get kind of council member and Mr. Mayor, your thoughts on, do we engage an outside service, or how do we control this? Because it really ruins the area. It's really difficult, especially just to walk the dogs and the kids play outside. It's a big health hazard.
Thanks very much. We'll take up the issue, and you're more than welcome to come and talk to us, the city manager and the staff, and more about it, and see what we might be able to do to help you.
Perfect.
We appreciate your coming tonight.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, reports of boards or commissions. Don't see anyone here. Consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes. Item 8, unfinished business, and this will be Mr. Kramer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is the item before you tonight is the second reading of the amendments to Chapter 20. There are 2 amendments for the wireless telecommunication facilities. One amendment is allowing for tower heights to rise above 40 feet for corridors, state highway corridors, and adding 4 additional criteria or standards that must be met for consideration by a designated decision maker. The second amendment is clarifying a typo in a later section within that Chapter 20. So this is the second hearing. On the first hearing was on February the 18th. Staff is available for any questions that council may have.
All right, Councilor Blum. Good. Councilor Sheldon, any questions?
No.
Councilor Brown, Councilor Wheel, Councilor Savavi.
No comments.
All right.
I move to approve Council Bill 2, Series 2020, amending Sections 20-2-20 and 20-2-130 of the Municipal Code concerning wireless telecommunications facilities on second and final reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Need a roll call, please.
Councillor Safavi?
Yes.
Councillor Wheel?
Yes.
Councillor Brown?
Yes.
Councillor Gallagher?
Yes.
Councillor Sheldon?
Yes.
Councillor Blum?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. So we'll move on to the next item, 9A, new business, Resolution 7, Series 2020, approving a second amended and restated Arapahoe County 911 Authority intergovernmental agreement. Chief.
I feel like I'm going to get poked every time I talk up here. Anyway, Mayor, City Council, thank you. As you stated before you is a resolution approving the second amended and restated Arapahoe County 911 Authority intergovernmental agreement. And I'd like you to know that I have a guest in the audience. I have Bruce Romero, who's the Executive Director of the Arapahoe County 911 Authority, and Bruce will be available to assist with any questions that you might have tonight. So inside your memorandum that staff authored, it explained some things that go on with the authority. Probably the biggest thing is the 911 fee that is imposed on monthly wireless and phones to use for issues to help fund the 911 services and emergency communications in Arapahoe County. The fees are used for a variety of things when different groups from communication centers need some assistance. There is a board that is described in the memorandum with regard to how the 5 members are chosen. And then you have some information on the proposed IGA. The biggest issues within that IGA that are before you are ways that increases to the 911 fee would happen with regard to this new IGA. The other big one is how we are represented with regard to the state and who is taking care of us with lobbying issues and things that come before the legislatures trying to deal with 911 issues. And to be honest, it's a very complicated type of a problem that needs people to really understand why we're doing things the way we're doing with emergency operations and communication centers. Additionally, there's some small things in there with regard to name changes, and there's other minimal changes dealing with punctuation and all of those types of things. So I know that I went over that with a very quick brush from the memorandum. You have both the old IGA and the new one in your packets. And at this time, I'd be happy to try to field any questions that you might have with Mr. Romero's help.
Thank you for the presentation, Chief. Councilor Blum, any?
Chief, could you explain how they do collect this 911 fee? It says it's imposed on each wireless, wireline, and telephone line. So how is that imposed? Maybe you can answer that, John.
Thank you. That fee is actually collected by the wireless, wireline, or voice over internet protocol provider, CenturyLink, Verizon, or whatever company you have your service with. And then they are, by state statute, allowed to keep a 2% administrative fee for processing that, and then they submit those fees directly to the local 911 authority.
Thank you.
Councilor Sheldon.
No comment, thank you.
No questions.
Councilor Brown.
Just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Romero for being here. It's always great to see a new face in the audience, and you wonder if you're either an irate resident or... So I appreciate the fact that you're here providing us with this information. I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Councilor Wheel.
I'm fine, thanks. No questions.
No question, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Chovre. If there's no further discussion,
I move to approve Resolution 7, Series 2020, approving the second amended and restated Arapahoe County 911 Authority intergovernmental agreement.
Second.
have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 9B, Council Bill 4, Series 2020, amending section 16410 of the Municipal Code concerning off-street parking requirements, and this is the first reading. Mr. Kramer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight before you is an item on first reading regarding amending section 16-4-10 of the Municipal Code regarding parking requirements. Council may remember this item. This has come through a few different discussions here at City Council and then also Planning and Zoning Commission last month. There was a number of discussions that were raised through the code modernization process about parking. Specifically, the issues that were originally raised were through places of assembly parking requirements. Many of those suggested changes were not adopted through the code modernization process. However, there was one of the discussion items that was had that led to the proposal tonight regarding the lead-in section for the entire parking requirement table. You can see the language that's on the screen on how it reads today. The confusion stems from the fact that this sentence is a lead-in for the entire table, and it applies to all uses. Some of those uses do have different component parts, and those component parts, for some, meant that they had to add parking requirements on top of each other, even though it was a single use. So staff did some research, talked with Todd Messenger, the consultant for the Code Modernization Project, and clarified the conclusion was that when the code intends for the component parts to be added together, it says so, and when it doesn't, it simply says what the parking requirement is. I should clarify that this change is not, while the examples in the staff memo that were in council's packet tonight and some of the previous discussions that we've had here in city council meetings, while we have discussed private clubs and places of assembly quite a bit, this section would not just affect those two positively or negatively either way. This is a lead-in section for the entire parking table. So again, this is how we would calculate it. We're just attempting to provide clarity so that there's no confusion as to how it would then be calculated. So the language that Todd was able to work with Kathy and I on is the language that you see before you tonight, which is the recommendation. The recommendation is to add the word land before use and then eliminate the last part of that phrase. So on February 11th, Planning and Zoning voted unanimously to recommend to City Council approval of that text change. So staff is available for any questions that council may have at this time.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Kramer. Councilor Savavi, any questions?
No.
Okay. Councilor Wheel?
No questions?
Mr. Brown?
No questions.
Yeah, just a comment. I appreciate the clarification.
Councilor Sheldon?
Chris, thank you. I'm still struggling with this language. The removal of the last 7 or 8 words is troubling to me. I do think we're getting closer because this is specific to none and more of a broad lead into the whole chart. But it's troubling to me because it potentially would lead one to believe that our code has changed. Right now, this language exists in our code as it is today, and it's been that way for as long as I've been on council. For someone to come in and read this new code with the last 9 words stricken, although it does clarify specific land uses in the table below, I do wonder if it causes potentially more confusion than making this change at all. And I'm probably confusing you all more than helping educate you, but I am not going to be in favor of this tonight.
Councilor Blum? Any other discussion then at all? I'll entertain a motion if we want.
I move to approve Council Bill 4, Series 2020, amending Section 16-4-10 of the Municipal Code concerning off-street parking requirements on first reading.
We have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any others, further discussion? This is just first reading, of course. We can bring it back. All right, I'll call for a vote. This is a roll call.
Counselor Wheel?
Yes.
Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
No.
Counselor Blum?
No.
Counselor Safavi?
Yes.
That passes. And we'll, on to second reading, the next scheduled meeting, April? Maybe April. Yeah, April. Okay, item 9C, which is a explanation kind of description from board, commissions, and committee terms. And Laura, if you'd like to lead us.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Stewart, members of City Council. Staff is bringing for Council's information and to get some direction. Several members of the city's boards, commissions, and committees have terms that will end at the end of May, and there's one in July that I stuck in there just so we can get it as part of this group, since we're trying to get everyone to end in May, ultimately. So the table on page 3 shows all of the members whose terms are ending. Many of them do wish to be reappointed at council's discretion, and several, a group does not wish to be reappointed, so we are planning to advertise for those positions. But primarily what staff is asking for council direction on for those members who are ending their third term, or actually second and third terms, our current policy would trigger a solicitation of applications and to go through the recruitment process for those positions. However, that is at council's discretion, and if council would prefer to reappoint those members who are ending their second or third terms and who desire reappointment, to keep that knowledge on the commission for people who have good attendance records, et cetera, then council has done that in the past, and so staff is wondering how council would like to proceed with these particular member terms. And then secondly, to have several council members, 2 per commission, volunteer to review applications, conduct interviews, and make recommendations for appointments for those positions that will become vacant in May.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. And these charts are very helpful, too. I appreciate it. What's the pleasure of council? Any suggestions? Do we want to take this up tonight? I guess do we have even the luxury of time to think about this and do it in April? Or
We can, yeah. If you'd like to consider it and we can bring it back in April, that's fine.
So we have a couple of options. We could deal with it tonight about these, or we could think about it and bring it back in April. What's the wish of council? You want to deal with it?
Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward.
Councilor Wheel, what's your pleasure as far as?
I think it's a great proposal. We ought to go ahead and if folks are in a position and want to be reappointed, that we go ahead with that, and as long as they meet, attendance and things like that we talked about as criteria. So as long as they're offered the opportunity, because they've done a good job, reappointment's great, and I would be happy also to be one of the interviewers as you go forward.
Okay. Any other volunteers for interview?
I'd be happy to do PTRC.
Okay.
Randy, do you have a preference of which board you do?
Wherever you need me.
That's the spirit. Anybody else?
Are we also looking for Board of Adjustments? Looking at this?
So we'd only be looking for Board of Adjustment if you didn't want to, or if you wanted to open up the application process because those members are completing their second or third term. If you'd like to just reappoint, Carrie, Bill, and Jennifer, they all would love to be reappointed, but they all expressed that if you guys want new blood on the commission, they completely understand, but they would also be happy to serve if you'd like to just reappoint them. So that's up to you.
So do we decide that tonight, Mayor, on these, whether we're going to keep them?
PTRC
So actually, the BOA would be helpful to know now, because if we do want to solicit for applications, we would get that in the next available issue of the crier.
And I guess maybe you ask Councilor Wheel, since you're involved with that, about whether it seems to me they're doing a good job.
I would certainly agree with that. It's a cohesive group. They're thoughtful in their deliberations, and I think Carrie does a good job as chair, and Bill and Jennifer both are active participants. So my recommendation would be to reappoint.
And I feel that the role of that board is a little bit different. It's not as much about idea generation and input as it is about understanding the requirements of the code and the community and applying them in an equitable manner. And so I am more comfortable. I'm generally the person who says we have this policy of 2 terms and then recruit, even if it ends up with the same people. But I feel like maybe BOA is an exception. So as I look at it, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who are only in their first term, who would like to be reappointed, and who appear to have generally pretty good attendance. And so I would be in favor of reappointing those people: Fred Wolf, Kate Murphy, David Schmidt, Allison Lynch, Kathy Finger, and Dino Maniatis. We've got 3 people on Board of Adjustment who I would also be in favor of reappointing: Carrie Sullivan, Bill Rabson, and Jennifer Allen. And then we've got 4 people to interview for because they don't wish to be reappointed, and that's PTRC, the Arts Commission. I think I already volunteered for that, and then Quincy Farm.
Okay, any other volunteers for Quincy Farm? Probably then, and we have the Art Commission already taken care of, right? So Quincy Farm then and PTRC?
I'd be willing to interview for PTRC.
Okay, yeah,
I'm happy to step in on Quincy Farm if we need another one.
great, okay.
Then Randy and Dan for Quincy Farm.
And then are we going to reappoint, as Mayor Pro Tem pointed out, the rest of them? The directions to the staff will be to reappoint those?
Yes, exactly correct. I think that's the sense of council, that those that on the first terms, let's reappoint. Those eligible, let's reappoint.
The only other thought I would have is that we look at, I feel like there may be some overlap in the applicants for PTRC and Quincy Farm. And if that is the case, then I don't know they need to interview twice. If you end up getting completely different sets of applicants, then by all means. But if it's a group of people saying I'd be interested in either, then maybe you guys can arm wrestle for
I think we'll
who
probably
gets to do it.
see what we can do. We can juggle that and see, and then we can ask their first preference maybe, and then have them do that. But let's just see what we get for kind of in, and then we can take stock and decide how that goes. Thank you, Laura.
Laura, question for PTRC, do we have an applicant pool at this time that are already on file?
We do have several applications that haven't met that 2-year deadline yet, where we keep them for 2 years. And there's my notes. And I did look at the districts, because PTRC is our one commission where we want to try to appoint from each district. So there is one application from District 3, which will be our district that is not represented after Peter leaves. So, and I'll be contacting those people and see if they want to be a part of this process.
And then based upon that, put it into the crier? Based upon that discussion with those
Usually
people?
we would still advertise in the crier for new applications, but we would also include those applications that we already have,
Okay,
assuming those people still want to be a part of that process.
okay.
Let me point out, Carrie Sullivan's been chair for 3 terms and has had 9 meetings, so not a very busy.
I do agree with Councilor Brown, though. That is one that it really, institutional knowledge and is really valuable. And a turnover, you don't gain from having turnover on the BOA. So, and it's kind of a thankless position too. So, all right, great. I think that, Laura, do you have what you need? Okay. Unless there's other business, we can go on to reports. I can give a quick report. On the 21st, I attended the CML Executive Board meeting, and I can give you a little bit more update on the RTA issue, House Bill 1151. It's interesting, the Policy Committee had recommended opposing it. The Executive Board Committee reversed the Policy Committee and said, no, we will be neutral on RTAs. And we recently had a meeting with the Metro Mayor's Caucus, and they are completely still on board, and it appears also as well that Boulder and Louisville, which had raised the objections, are also on board with the understanding that they can be an opt-out. So that's kind of the issue. So they won't be trapped into a taxing entity that taxes them for something they don't want, which is, I thought was the way it was going to be anyway. But anyway, so I think it's all finally come to an agreement, and we'll just see what happens in the legislature. But if that does happen, that could be a way of really funding some transportation improvements around here, potentially well, whatever. I mean, you can Hampden, Bellevue, you take your pick. And also there's also discussion of having a share back with some of these districts. So the taxing district and then sharing back to communities like ours to have money to spend on their own roads and things like that. So all of that is possible, but this is only the first step, and we have to get through the General Assembly first. We also had a interesting, the kind of similar issue on the arbitration changes, which we talked about, the changes to the arbitration law to make to impose more conditions for fairness in arbitration, and that was a very much concern to the Metro Mayor's Caucus because of the impact it has on the building, particularly of low income housing and also owner occupied multifamily housing. So the policy committee had said wanted to support it. The executive committee reversed them and said no, we oppose it unless it's amended to to carve out construction from the arbitration issues, from the arbitration changes. So we'll see where that goes on in the General Assembly as well. On the 24th, I attended the meeting of the Open Space and Trail Advisory Board. I represent District 2. And there was an interesting discussion there. The vote is coming up to reauthorize that sales tax for Arapahoe County. That'll be in 2023. So the thought is, and that's a big actually line item in our budget, is the money we acquire on share back from Arapahoe County. So I just want to make everybody aware that's coming up, and we're going to want to get on board with supporting that as well, because it's an important part of our budget and an important part of Arapahoe County. So far, it's always passed very easily because people like to vote for open space, and this tax has been proved to be very popular. It's one of the most popular things I think Arapahoe County does, and the commissioners are certainly supporting it. So anyway, discussions about that, about how that's going to roll out, and what the campaign, even now it's 2020, still looking ahead to see when that, how that will be, done. And then we'll have the ordinary grant meetings and site visits, and we're anticipating grants this year for Arapahoe County. On the 25th, I met with Mayor Hancock and Jordan, his assistant, Jordan Sauer, and talked about things. They're still don't know about exactly the timing for the Hampton underpass. They're still going to get back to me, and I'll let everybody know. Right now, they're thinking April, I think. But I've heard other things that it's maybe kicked back until next fall. So we'll see. Anyway, we just talked generally about other issues. On the 26th, I attended a meeting with Kendra Black. That she was having an open house for their proposed changes to the family definitions of families in Denver. I don't know if you've heard about this. So right now, Denver defines, limits single families to 2 unrelated people living together, or obviously a family related by blood, but only 2 unrelated. They're proposing big changes to this to make it 8 in the smallest homes, and then also to raise it up based on the house level so that if your house is larger, it could be up as many as 20 or 25 or 30 people living in one home that are unrelated. So it's caused a big controversy in Denver, and people were crammed into the to the presentation. So it kind of affects us because they're on our borders. I was more interested in seeing what they were talking about. I think there's a huge opposition to it. It's really coming from the staff of the Denver, and it talks about group homes, and they're trying to alleviate housing shortages, and this is one of their solutions to go. So we'll you should see more. We should see more about that coming up, and at least we can watch from us. Cherry Hills Village, we have our limit's 3, so 3 people unrelated by blood can live in the same house, and we're one of the lowest too. I think a lot of others are 4 or 5, kind of like that. I met with Mark Griffin and actually. Councilor Savavi talk about the Police Foundation, and he's all in on this and ready to handle it and go forward with it and take charge. So that was a very good meeting, and he needed to get approval from his company to make sure he can do this, and that's going on. And then he'll talk to the people at Greenwood Village to kind of understand what he needs to do to get this kind of rolling. And really, there's nothing to be done until they can get the tax 501c3 approval from the IRS. So we're just going to kind of hang on until that's done. We did meet with the executive committee. The city manager can report on that as well. The executive committee for the Bellevue I-25 interchange group. It was very interesting, and as we talked about before, the this committee is looking at the different options, either the SPUI, the single point urban interchange, or the split diamond configuration for redoing Bellevue I-25 interchange. I guess the significant occurrence at that meeting was that Denver said they're not ready to proceed at all until they study it much further. So they have their own studies going on about their issues and Bellevue, particularly Bellevue Station, and how that incorporates with their master planning and things, and particularly multimodal, and they're concerned about how off-ramps onto Union Boulevard will affect multimodal, and particularly, I think, safety issues about high-speed traffic coming up onto Union. And so they've basically put the brakes on it. Obviously, Arapahoe County and Greenwood Village are going to meet with them, and they're very much in favor of the split diamond. But then city manager can add, Jim, if I've overlooked something. And then, let's see, last week I met with the Transportation Committee of the MMC, and again, that was where we had the discussion with Louisville and Boulder about the major issue there was the House Bill 1151, and about their being on board and finally dropping their opposition to that. The idea that it would really be Dr.Cog, it would be giving Dr.Cog the authority to be a taxing entity. Any taxes would have to go to the vote of the people, but it would have Dr.Cog actually have the ability to kind of describe the plans and figure out what kind of transportation improvements what the plan would be in the proposal, and then after that's been identified, then take that to the people for a vote, and it would only apply to Dr.Cog members, obviously, and then as I mentioned, there'd be an opt-out for those jurisdictions who didn't want a part of a particular plan. I did want to say before we ended that I think we'll probably have to, I think I mentioned to council members, we'll continue the next meeting because of a lack of a quorum. Spring break, I think everybody's out, or a lot of people are out. So I think, and it looks like our agenda is would be light anyway for that meeting. So it's certainly appropriate that we could all decide here that to cancel that meeting and then meet again in the first week of April. So that's my report. Members of City Council as well.
Just a couple quick things. Tomorrow, there's a Highline Canal Working Group, also known now as the Canal Collaborative meeting. Mayor Stewart's going to attend. I believe Jim Thorson's going to be attending. I will not be able to be there tomorrow, but look forward to hearing after action report on that. You're going to mention something about what we're writing or no? Yeah. And then I'd like to thank Brent Klein for coming in. I think I agree with you that I don't know that I don't know what the solution is, but I believe that with this several $1 million city asset that we are investing in right now, the goose population could theoretically be a pretty significant problem for us. So I'd like to see if staff can put their heads together, get together with our community members, neighbors, and see if we can figure out some kind of solution or at least way to try to combat it as we start getting closer to the opening up that park. Hopefully in September, is that when we're looking at opening that? Okay. That's all. Thanks.
In the next crier, we will include a short article on the Union interchange.
I would also like to thank Mr. Klein, and just almost exactly what you said, Dan, that it hadn't even really occurred to me until you were speaking that with all of the money that we are investing in this park, and the vision of even having a small gathering in the Allen, slope so that you can sit on the ground. And I just think of my experience at the school across the street, and there's no way on the planet I would want to sit on the ground. Or want my child sitting on the ground there either. So I agree that I would love if that was something staff could look into. I know nothing about what the potential solutions might be, but I do see how that could be a potentially large problem for our community, and it would be a real shame to invest so much money in a park that people don't use because it's nothing but goose droppings. it was interesting, I think, to your point, Mayor, about Denver's proposed change. There have been several comments on Nextdoor about pointing out the recall procedure in Denver. There is a lot of opposition to that perspective change. So hopefully they will navigate that as best they can. I am one of the people who will be out of town for the next meeting, so I would also be in favor of canceling that. And then as far as the Citizens Advisory Task Force for the master plan, I appreciate everyone who has made your appointments. It sounds like this is going to be a real powerhouse task force, and in that vein, I would like to appoint Mayor Chrisman from District 6.
Okay. Councilor Wheel?
A couple of things. Dr. Cog, probably the big news there was basically what Russell had talked about with House Bill 1151. And the dialogue was extensive, but generally focused. I think that the main thrust was we need a statewide solution. Yeah, a regional solution would be better than nothing, but we really need to push hard for a statewide solution. So rather than support the legislation, which would have been a regional solution, the action was to monitor it and then get with the lobbyists and get with the sponsor of the bill and see if we can continue to nudge for more of a statewide, sort of, they call it the grand compromise, but nudge for a statewide solution. Interesting aside, the folks from Glendale were they were in the spotlight, and they've got plans to build a river walk in Glendale, so I thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit. Doug Robinson has agreed to be on the Citizens Action Task Force, so I think he'll be a real strong add. A lot of smart guy, a lot of investment banking background, and I think a real good ad, and he's very enthusiastic about it. I got an email as I was about mid-afternoon. Dylan Hibberline, that guy who was really key to the noise task force, apparently he's moving on to Grand Junction, and so he's going to be vacating that position. They went ahead and announced a replacement, Rachel Keller, so she'll be filling in that role. And that's all oh yeah, a call from HOA, just getting an update on the Glenmore stoplight. So the Cherry Hills Farm is busy cheering on the activities there.
It's a weekly conversation we have with that, but supposedly they will be under construction tomorrow, Jay? We hope.
Yeah.
Monday, Tuesday,
I will be out there watching, just like I'm watching them build my office.
Well, we're going to ask them to knock on your door first before anything happens.
I'd be happy to help.
That's all I have.
So to just build on what the mayor mentioned about the police foundation, a little bit more background. I think it was about 3 weeks ago, myself, our city manager, and chief, we met with the chief of police at Greenwood Village and had a very good conversation. I think we learned quite a bit about the do's and don'ts as their experience putting the foundation together, which for them has been really a great success. Follow up to that meeting and what we learned. Again, myself, Mayor, we had a meeting with Mr. Griffin. At the end of it, if you want to go ahead and set up something, a foundation like this, you need somebody that is experienced and feel passionate about it. And Mr. Mark Griffin is that individual. So that conversation was very positive, and I think we came up with a name of probably 10 or 12 individuals within our village that will also feel passionate, and Mr. Griffin will be talking to them. I believe that we will have, once this is set up, I think that donation will come in and there will be multiple $10,000 donations that I think within our village on an annual basis we should expect from various folks, and I think this will be an absolute success. So I think in a matter of few months, we can have maybe another way to appreciate our police force here, and a sort of a sense of maybe a little bit of a backing from our village to our policemen and women. In terms of, I had a call from a neighbor who was pretty shaken up a couple weeks ago, a little less than a couple weeks ago, that, again, I think we hear about this trying to make a left turn, somebody's coming, almost killed them, and you know, he was asking, I let him vent, and I think he had every reason to vent. But one thing that was requested for us to maybe look into is, can we, and would this help if, where we have all those left turns, if we have a sign that it says, do not block the intersection? Because one of the challenges here is that you try to make those left turns, and you know, you're ready to make the left turn, and one car comes and stops that intersection, and the whole thing comes to a halt, and the level of frustration is pretty bad. And in fact, myself 3 days ago was trying to make a turn, and thank to a good Samaritan, a big truck driver that I was trying to, another car came, blocked it. I was stuck in the middle of a road, and this truck driver completely pulled his car almost at a 90-degree angle to protect me and my family from cars hitting us. And I started thinking about this neighbor that called a few days earlier and was suggesting, again, put a sign on for some of these left turns that do not block the intersection. So I think it's something that is worth looking into. That's all.
Mayor, I forgot to note that Alex Brown will be representing District 3 on the task force.
Okay. City Manager.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Councils. Just a couple updates. I don't think I will go into the I-25 Bellevue anymore. I thought the mayor did a pretty good job of explaining what happened at that meeting. I'm happy to explain any more if the council would like. I just also wanted to let council know that tomorrow I'll be meeting with CDOT along with staff, and we're going to have a discussion about several things, but everything from our request to put a potential signal on Hampton and Sedgwick, which we felt was warranted and met the warrants for CDOT, and so we'll have that discussion. But along with that, recently I sent a letter to CDOT regarding University and Foxtail out of the Buell Mansion area, requesting that they put do not block or keep clear signage there. It's something that we've been asking for on several locations, including Cherry Ridge and other locations. So we've got several locations throughout the city along that major corridors where it's getting harder and harder to make left turns out of the neighborhoods. And on one hand, we're doing a Hampton study that will kick off this week, is it? It'll kick off this week with the agencies, but eventually they'll be hiring a contractor to look at the entire corridor along Hampton from I-25 over to Santa Fe. Hopefully we'll come up with some recommendations along that corridor, which is probably our worst as far as the amount of traffic. With regards to the signal over at Glenmore, it took us a long time just to get the signal approved, and we're anxiously awaiting for the construction to start. Hopefully that will start this week, and the signal poles we put on Rush, normally a 6-month lead time, they should be coming hopefully within the next 30 days or so. And by the time they get here, we'd like them to go up immediately and get that signal up and operating. With regards to the geese, I'm just reminded of a story in my previous location where they had a peacock problem, and the peacocks would chirp very loudly in the morning and wake everybody up, and they're not quiet birds. And the city manager at the time, his name was Harry Peacock, dealt with that issue, and I don't know if the next city manager's last name will be Goose or Geese, but if it does, it may bode well. But certainly I think it's something we can look into from a staff perspective and see if there's any options that are available to us. So with that, that's all I have today.
Good, Mr. Goldie.
Just real quick, tomorrow, if you're around, you will see the
prefabricated restroom will be installed. There should be a 300-ton crane here about 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we will get that lifted and into place. And then a few weeks after that, we will start the roof for the picnic shelter that is attached to that building. So we'll keep moving along at John Mead there.
Chief Dovre? Mr. Kramer? Mrs. Sager?
We'll be applying for the budget award again this year, so I have the document in your packet.
Yes. Thank
So
you.
if you have any corrections, just let me know. It's due March 11th, so I'll be submitting it on March 11th.
And thank you, by the way, for putting that together. I know that represents an enormous amount of work, so thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Legal.
Just a few minor things. Some bills that maybe didn't have a direct impact on the village, but nonetheless were important to municipalities in the state, died in committee. That's the basic like functions in public spaces, which was going to allow folks to be in places doing all kinds of things. That died in committee, as well as a bill that was purporting to prohibit employers from controlling their employee use of marijuana as it affected the employment. So those were two important victories on bills that I know CML opposed. And then on the legal front, there is a case that this city is interested in, and that's the Independent Ethics Commission. It's going to be argued in front of the Colorado Court of Appeals on March 11th. That's the mayor of Glendale, and the issue being, if you're a home rule city that has adopted your own code of ethics, to what extent does the Independent Ethics Commission have jurisdiction over your behavior in determining whether or not it complies with ethical standards? So that's going to be an important decision, and when there's a result from the court, I'll be sure to pass that along to you all. That's it.
Thank you, Kathy. Any more business before we take up the executive session?
I move that we move into executive session pursuant to CRS Section 24-6-4024C and 24-6-4024F for the purpose of discussing personnel matters and matters required to be kept confidential by CRS 24-72-2043A11A regarding the city manager position.
And upon completion of that?
Oh, and upon completion, adjourning.
Okay, second now.
We have a motion and a second. We need a roll call, please.
Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher? Yes. Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Counselor Blum? Yes. Counselor Safavi?
Yes.
Counselor Wheel?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. Yeah.